First of all, thank you very much. We know we send to you a lot of mail because we have to organize this meeting this summer, but with holidays in different period in different countries, it's not so easy. But now here we are, and with this ETP program here, only to have also an introduction, not only for the people that already know our project, but also for our speaker and external person. I give only very few minutes of presentation about our SMACR project and why we are here speaking about demand responsive transport and action plan in order to develop this kind of actions. First of all, is SMACR project, so here only very rapid information. SMACR project is a Central Europe project with a focus on working on developing demand responsive transport solution and flexible public transport solution in peripheral and rural area. The project we have reached, at least we have an half of our project life, and we are 9 partners with all around the Central Europe area, and the lead partner is SRM Reti e Mobilità here from Emilia-Romagna region in Bologna. So we have different partners. We have 3 scientific partners and other public administration working on this specific topic. And now we are here because one of the activities related to this project is this enlarged transfer program. That is a geographical expansion and extended cooperation scheme among the project partners and 10 followers cities and organizations that decided to joining us and to work on sharing knowledge and experience on how to develop demand responsive transport solution in peripheral areas. As many of you know, it's a long working activities because we started in the last month with a state-of-the-art report. So several of you sent to us, I think, very interesting studies on the problems and on the opportunity to develop this kind of services of flexible public transport services in different contexts. So we think it's also very interesting because these 10 followers are quite different one from another. So it's also interesting to see how different solutions can be developed in different areas. But the main objective of this ETP program, so this enlarged transfer program, it's to develop some action plan, some measures and solutions to develop in some case or to improve in other case these demand responsive services. Also in the project, the project partners are working on action plans. So also in our SMACR project, we have 6 partners working on developing and testing also this solution. And we hope and we are working to have a final meeting in next years where this action plan, so this 10 action plan from the TP followers and from the project partners will be presented, and we hope also to have the opportunity to meet in person to exchange this experience and also to know a little bit more from the other cases. Today it's one of the 3 training events we foreseen in the project. So the goal of today is not only from my point of view to give only some very brief information about the next activities related to the project and in particular to the action plan development, but in particular here today we try to give to each of you some inspiration, some ideas, some tools, some data about how to develop this action plan and which kind of measures can be developed. So in the first session, we will start with Andrea Ballarin, that is one of our technical experts, that will present the main results of the state-of-the-art reports. You know, many of you work on these reports, so Andrea will present some preliminary overview of the main results of these studies. Studies we hope are helpful for you to identify also opportunities to develop this kind of experience. And we have here a first case from Milton Keynes Council and Adele Wearing, that join us with a very, we think, interesting and inspiration case from a large demand responsive transport initiative development. So we will give the floor this morning to Adele, and after I will spend only 15 minutes to present the template we send to you. So only the structure of the SMACR activities, and we foreseen 15 minutes of question and answer if you have some doubts in relation to this template and to the next SMACR activities. So we have a little break, and in the second part, Riccardo Marattini, that is our technical external that help us with Andrea in working on these activities, will present some tools and some general info on how to pass from the state-of-the-art to the action plan. So a presentation of issues, tools, and data to develop these action plans. After, we have other two case studies. The first one will be presented by Gabriele Grea and this Share Place. That is another Central Europe project that ended last year, and that we think is very interesting because also in this project some demand responsive transport solutions are developed, and also this project, as is closed, we think it's very interesting also because I have a concrete experience to share with us. And the other presentation is from Michele Scottai from the Friuli Venezia Giulia Transport Trieste Trasporti. That is also another case we think very interesting, also as have concrete implementation lesson learned to be shared with us. Finally, we have this roundtable with question and answer. We received from some of you some questions, so we will present also in this case some reflection, and I can anticipate the questions are mainly related to the economic aspect of these demand responsive transport services. This is all from my side. I only invite you to visit also our project website, where there is a lot of information about our project and also the first deliverable. We think it's interesting also to read them. So I close with my brief introduction, and I give the floor to Andrea Ballarin with the first presentation. I give to you the speaker role. I think now you can present.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and can you see my screen? Right. Great.
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, thank you very much, Dennis, for the introduction, and welcome to everybody to this event. As Dennis already anticipated, very briefly, I will try to summarize in very short the huge efforts that all the partners of the project have done regarding the, let's say, outlining of some of the main let's say, issues describing the status of the regions involved in this state-of-the-art reports of SMACR initiative. In particular, I would like to start just briefly saying that, as you already, Dennis, said, that this is the main objective of SMACR, so to somehow identify and promote mobility and transport services in a demand responsive way within this area that we are now seeing very briefly. And this area were selected through the project partners, of course, 10 different areas within the project partners territories, and in each one of them we were somehow identifying some let's say core and surrounding area. This is the let's say the definition we find out within the state of the report, and with the final aim of let's say defining a framework in which designing the state of the art of the transport demand and potentials within the different territories, and to pave the way to realization of the action plan that Dennis was talking before. Just a brief, let's say, additional information regarding the core and surrounding area. It was let's say an option and an idea that we were somehow providing in order to better define two main, let's say, interests of the information to go deep in within this state-of-the-art reports, as far as, of course, while the core area is to be considered the one which is going to be, let's say, somehow served or somehow benefit from the new or additional demand response transport service, the surrounding area are the one that are somehow completing the core area, and at the same time the one in which several relevant destination point of interest and polarities are let's say describing the territory in more general term around the core area. As I said, with this this is a very short summary regarding the reports, 10 different reports that partners were providing. They are documents that are quite rich of information, so the idea is to somehow provide a very to point out some of the issues which were highlighted within the reports. As you can see here on the right, I just provided the list of or the index, let's say, of the information provided with the state-of-the-art report. And as you can see, of course, some focus, or the main focus, is in relation to the public transport services demand and needs related to the area, of course, with all the information related to the general description of the area. And an interesting issue, which I somehow highlight in yellow, is the Swot analysis that we were requesting to all the partners in order to point out and to find out some main findings regarding the results of these state-of-the-art reports. This is just a general overview, just to keep you aware of the general map of what we are talking about. This is more or less similar, or very similar, to the map that Dennis was presenting before in relation to the of course, to the partnership representing the SMACR project. As you can see here, we have 10 different regions in which we provided the state-of-the-art report, and let's say 4 of them were belonging to Italy, but as you can see, also 2 from Slovenia, 1 from Austria, 1 Poland, and Hungary. So we are basically representing almost the most interesting area of the Central European program we are dealing with. Some data I try to really summarize in brief. These are some of the information regarding surface and population, and we just take out some average density for the different territories that we have somehow underlined within the state of the report. The interesting things is that, as you can see, as far as we are mainly dealing with rural or peri-urban, let's say, areas, we have an average density which is quite low, as you can see, while only some of them have an average density which is quite high, which is, for example, the area near Padova, Este, or the one in Hungary, which are, on the contrary, are quite high, but because we are talking about areas which are basically related to urban or peri-urban area or peri-urban context, and this is why we have this quite high average of density of people for square kilometers. And I also provided the average density of the region, of the general region. As you can see, of course, we are talking in general terms about areas or territories which are dealing with an average density of people which is generally lower, and so related to the more general concept of rural or peri-urban areas. Another issue we just pointed out, of course, all of these areas are mainly, as I said, dealing with let's say rural areas in general terms, but also with areas which are hillside or mountainous area, while only few of them are more urban or peri-urban, as I said before. And this is matching also with this definition of let's say typology of area, which we were somehow trying to point out when describing in synthesis the different territories of the state of the arts. I also provided some data which were not always available within the state of the art reports, but just to keep it in mind that as for what regards, for example, some of the point of interest that were somehow highlighted, these of course are also providing some relevant attractive for several kind of people, and in particular we just provided some information regarding the average annual overnight stays in terms of tourist presence. As you can see, some of them are particularly relevant, while some of them are not so let's say interesting from that point of view. And this is also in of course one of the issues that we wanted to somehow underline within the purposes of the initiative that we are going to follow with the SMACR project. Also, a very brief overview of some of the issues regarding accessibility and transport availability within the different areas. As you can see, bus connection are basically available in all the areas, while rail connection is not always available, even if somehow easily reachable, as far as the maybe the railway station is not so far away from the core area that we were pointing out. Another interesting issue is that in some of these areas, some of these areas are somehow influenced or let's say available. There are available some existing demand response transport, which can somehow provide an interesting baseline to work on, and so this is why it is it could be really interesting to further develop this this issue that SMACR is addressing. Another issue briefly regarding the stakeholder highlighted by the state of the art report, and here I just wanted to, let's say, underline the fact that some of these are quite, let's say, less relevant, at least at the very first sight from the state-of-the-art reports, and in particular the one related to the small and medium the involvement of and the present and involvement of small and medium enterprises, as well as sectoral agency. This is maybe one of the issues that we have to somehow while on the contrary, as you can see here in green, regional authority and local and infrastructure and public service provider are quite present within the analysis that were carried out. Interesting is that maybe this particular sector of the stakeholder could be one of them that we can somehow further develop, because it could be a very interesting option for the action plan in the future. I go quickly through the main findings of the SWOT analysis. As you can see here, among the strengths, then of course, if I remember correctly, Dennis, the PowerPoint presentation will be available, so I will try to be very short, and then the document will be available. But in any case, the important thing is that the potential demand is basically very interesting and underlined as very interesting for the different territories, and that there are actually currently ongoing several synergies with the different areas, not only on the core but also taking into consideration also the surroundings ones. Another issue regarding the strengths, of course, is that multimodal transport network is available within the regions that we somehow highlighted, but of course with particular reference to the bus line, while sometimes railway lines should be still to be implemented. Of course, among the weaknesses, the private car available option is one of the one that was underlined as a very strong limit, potential limit. At the same time, of course, particular reference to promotion.
I think there is some microphone. I hear some noise. Okay, now is okay.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. And sometimes the lack of data to be further analyzed to support the development of this kind of services. Among the opportunities, of course, an interesting issue related to the growing cooperation with stakeholders, which is really a good opportunity, together with the rising awareness on sustainable mobility option, which is still growing during the last year. So it could be a really important opportunity to be somehow catch by the different territories, and the possibility to attract younger generation, because of several of these services are usually using ICT tools, which are usually more interesting for younger generation. At the same time, of course, among the threats, of course, the fact that these ICT tools are not often, let's say, friendly with the older generation, that of course that could be a threat in terms of inclusive opportunity for other kind of users, and at the same time some let's say easy to read, let's say, issues regarding to the fact that you have to now change your mind, so to the traditional behaviors is not always so easy as we all know. Last but not least, also of course, COVID provided some difficulties in trust public transportation. So probably still this the results of the COVID pandemic, of course, maybe should still be some problematic for this kind of initiative. Last but at least last slide, of course, which then Riccardo will for sure underline more in particular, some very keywords related to the general othership that came out from the state-of-the-art reports. The importance of involving stakeholders, which is basically fundamental and somehow underlined by all the partners involved in the state-of-the-art report, and together with this, the possibility to have a full and complete accessibility not only to the service but also to the information, which is otherwise not easy to reach, and at the same time and consequently not easy to publicize and to be available for users. And this is also let's say connected to the importance of having harmonized information and data to be strongly supported in order to let's say enhance the interest among this kind of services. And of course another issue is related to what we are basically talking in this moment. So the fact that EU projects, EU financing could provide very interesting opportunities to test or to somehow check if some of this initiative can be not only financial viable but in general terms sustainable from all the point of view. So this is basically all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrea. So we can pass to the next presentation. So to the first of our three case studies. So I give to Adele Wheeling. That first of all, thanks again to join us to present your very interesting case, because as Adele will present, this is, we think, a very interesting case, as is a large plan of development of a DRT service in Milton Keynes. So I give the floor to Adele. I think you can present now and share your screen.
I think you were going to present for me, Dennis, because we had some technical.
Okay.
Thank you.
Only 1 second to open the presentation.
Well, Dennis very kindly sets that up for me. Thank you all for having me. I'm Adele Waring. I work for Milton Keynes Council as the Strategic Lead for Transport, and I've had responsibility for introducing demand responsive transport in Milton Keynes. And I will try and keep this tight time-wise.
1 second, I open the presentation.
Thank you.
1 second, I open more large.
So my apologies, folks. Our IT are not very friendly to external systems, so this will be a lot more straightforward than me trying to present from this end. Thank you. So I've just introduced myself. So do we want to jump straight to the next slide? Thank you. So we introduced MK Connect as our demand responsive transport service on the 1st of April this year. COVID actually worked for us a little bit on this one, but it did mean we were on a very tight timetable because all of our contracts were ending on the 1st of April. So we had no choice about when we went live. It had to be ready. It's a borough-wide system. So the whole of the map on the right, the whole area that's in white is included. And you can see just about, I think, that from about the middle of the map up, it's all rural. So you've got sort of the urban Milton Keynes area, but you've also got a substantial area in the north of the borough that is very rural. Olney is the largest town, and it's actually a very small market town in that area. We integrated the system with the commercial bus network to an extent, in that if your journey can be fulfilled by the commercial bus network, you will get pushed to a bus. We have had some complaints from users saying the system doesn't work, it keeps telling me to get a bus, but that is actually what it's supposed to do. So because we didn't want to undermine the commercial network, but equally we wanted to be able to offer end-to-end journeys anywhere in Milton Keynes. So whereas before we had a lot of routes and you could get to some places, now you can get anywhere in Milton Keynes without owning a car. The fleet itself, we went with half electric as a minimum, and several accessible vehicles in the fleet. Now, the reason we made that decision is around only being half electric is that at the moment the market for accessible vehicles, for full wheelchair accessible vehicles, isn't great for electrics. So those are diesel, just to make sure that we had the reliability for wheelchair vehicles. The service we're offering is running on private hire licenses, so mini cabs basically. The vehicles are under 10 seats. They're mostly around 8-seater minivans, but it's not run as a bus service. It is run as on smaller vehicles. And the parameters are different between the rural and urban areas. So in urban Milton Keynes, you can expect to pick up within 30 minutes. In the rural areas, we do say up to an hour because it can take quite a long time to get a vehicle all the way out to Olney up at the far north of the borough. We are going to review that in October and just make a decision about whether we want to have the same service parameters for the whole service. But in terms of how it compares to the bus services they did have, many of the bus services weren't running more than hourly, even in the city on the subsidised routes, and out in places like Olney, they could easily be 2 hours apart. The service runs from 6 AM to 11 PM, which is about in line with when our bus services run, but doesn't affect the late night taxi trade. And on a Sunday, we run from 9 AM to 6 PM, which is, again, more than we were offering in a lot of areas on the bus. Next slide. How did I ever get this approved? We were running subsidised bus routes. We were running about 11 complete bus routes, and the next slide is just a quick map overview of what that looked like, which was about half our network at our cost, with very few people travelling on them. So at most, we had about 14% of trips were on the subsidised network, which is about 1 million trips pre-COVID out of the 9 to 10 million we were running each year. And it was costing us, say, 3.3 million euros, which was only going to go up because contract prices have gone up significantly in the last few that we've let. So we were looking at potentially up to 5 million in the next couple of years as an annual cost, which we couldn't sustain. And this is where COVID helped us, because it did focus everybody's attention very much on the cost of this and the low patronage, because obviously it dropped off to virtually nothing on the subsidised routes during lockdown. Once it had been accepted politically that we couldn't sustain what we were doing, they were faced with a couple of choices. Either we cut a load of the routes and ran fewer, leaving lots of areas with nothing, or we did something really different. So we actually approached VIA initially for their modelling team, and we sent them all our stats on pre and during COVID patronage. We sent them maps of our routes, and we asked them to come up with some options and solutions. And I mean, it was well worth doing, because that was how we sold this in the end. Was we were able to show through the modelling what it would cost to run, that it was viable, that it didn't mean having a dozen more vehicles on the road. The fleet is comparable in terms of the number of vehicles to what we were running in fixed buses. They're smaller vehicles and half of them are electric, so it's much greener. But in terms of numbers, we've not had to put lots more vehicles on the road. It is costing us less. It's costing us, we are still running a couple of subsidised services that go across the boundaries, because we didn't want to get into that with demand responsive. So in total, we're saving about £1 million a year on this from what we were paying, and probably significantly more in terms of the long-term costs. If you just want to jump to the next slide. So this is just very quickly a visual of what our network looked like before, with all the subsidised services, which particularly around the urban areas undermined some of the commercial services, because we were running a lot of subsidised routes on the same bits of road that the operators were trying to run commercial services. And we're currently taking about 24,000 trips a month on demand responsive, and directing about 12,000 trips a month to the commercial bus network. Okay, so next slide. So the implementation, we tendered for a transport operator and a platform, and VIA put in a bid for both. So it is running on the VIA. I think some of you may be familiar with it, the VIA platform, which is a reactive, allocation real-time platform for vehicles. We wanted a scalable service, so we started with 18 vehicles. We're now at 24 because demand has gone up. We started in the middle of lockdown. We're now out of it in the UK. So people are back at school, demand has gone up. And so we wanted something that could flex with that without substantial cost changes to us. So we set it, in the way we set up the contract, we would pay a flat fee and they would scale the number of vehicles accordingly. Because they're smaller vehicles, they can do that without major risk to them commercially. They'll run till they hit a point of capacity, and then they'll bring additional vehicles on. And we wanted transparent information, and we said right from the beginning we want to be able to share information with the operators, because if there are opportunities for a fixed bus route to be commercially viable, we want the operators to know that and be able to look at taking that on. So if any of you are familiar with the dashboard, we get tremendous information. They've given us full access to it, so we can see everything live as it comes in. Our customer services are dealing with people who are phoning rather than using the app. Mostly it's app-based, but we do have obviously older residents, so we do have a phone line in place for people who aren't comfortable using a smartphone. And so our customer services can see exactly what's happening as well when they're trying to book rides for those people. So it's been fantastic, and it's really good from our point of view for planning the future network to have that data coming into us. Next slide. Is it viable long term? It is a supported service. We are paying for it to be run. VIA take the revenue, and they are included in our concession scheme, so we pay for the trips by older people and disabled people. We don't see it being commercially viable. We do see it as something we will have to continue to support. But it's been a lot cheaper and a lot better than supporting a lot of fixed route bus services that hadn't been challenged in 10 years. They'd run the same routes. It's a lot more flexible. We see it, at the moment, we're running corner to corner across the whole borough, which is the least efficient way of doing this. But at the moment, our bus services aren't at a point that we have other options. We're working with operators to improve the core bus services. And the plan for the future is that we might work to a hub and spoke or transfer style network, where the vehicles stay in a locale and are much more effective, dropping people onto that core network of high speed, high quality services. We just need those high speed, high quality services before we can make that change. Overall, we do think it's been good value for money. We also think it's been better environmentally. So we think there are strong benefits to having done it this way. And we think it's important for city development. One of the things that happens at the moment for us, I don't know if it's the same for everyone, we get large developments with like a 10-year build out period. And we'll put in a bus route early, but it'll run once an hour and no one's using it. And then by the time the bus route is viable, the funding for it's run out. So we're proposing that you put in the infrastructure for a bus route, but you put DRT in. It's not restricted by the fact there's only a few houses in. It's not restricted by the fact that the main link road through the estate hasn't been opened yet. It can keep people from buying the second car in the first place. So when it is commercially viable to put a bus service in, it can be sustained. Okay, and next slide. It's the last one. Our lessons learned. There is a perception problem in Milton Keynes generally around public transport, and it is greater with this. So we are looking at putting, we're putting out data. We're making the data that we get from VIA, a lot of that available to the public on our website, because there is a view. Every failure is seen as a huge service failure. We're running 800 trips a day. Every person who isn't picked up on time is seen as a big service failure. and there's no they're not linking that to the level of service they're getting compared to the bus services they're getting. So there's a lot of comms to be done, and I think that there was more comms we should have been doing at the beginning. We were on a bit of a crunch time scale trying to deliver this in the first place, and we were in the middle of lockdown, which created additional challenges in letting people know what was happening. We've learned, for instance, that people don't actually look at the notices you put up in bus stops until their bus literally doesn't turn up. So we had notices out about this for several months before it came into place. We're still getting calls from people saying, I waited at my bus stop and my bus never showed up. You haven't told me there was a change. And normally, as I say, if we hadn't been in lockdown, we would have been out in the community doing sessions on this. Like many industries, we are struggling at the moment a bit with driver availability. So there is more growth in demand than we can meet at the moment. We are meeting some of the growth, and it has been growing week on week since it launched 4 months ago. And it's been a huge operational learning curve for us and VIA. I don't think either of us has entered into anything quite like this before. So there are some things we're going to be changing. There's some things we have been changing. There are some things we are going to be changing moving forward. They've had to bring in things like key sharing tech for the vehicles so that the vehicles can be on the road all day rather than relying on the driver being on the road all day. They're recruiting much more aggressively now. They've realized that they need a much bigger pool of drivers than they originally thought. And I think COVID has made people reflect as well. It is harder than it used to be to get drivers to do evening and Sunday shifts. It just is. People are more keen to spend time with their families now. There have been some other operational challenges. We didn't realize going into it with the electric vehicles quite how often they'd need to be charged and quite how long that would take them off the road for. So they've had to work around that, and they're now monitoring the battery power centrally, because we hit the problem where a bunch of drivers would start at the same time in the morning, so they'd all go off to charge at the same time in the afternoon. So there've been a few things like that. And then on the upside, the benefits of the data are really clear to us. We're able to have sensible conversations about planning. We're able to look at popular routes and where we might want to put in something different, put in a fixed bus. We're going to start looking at mobility hubs, and this will feed into where we need those interchange points. It's also been great from the point of view of investigating customer issues that we can actually get right into the back office data. And that's it from me. Thank you very much for your time. I have said to Dennis, I'm very happy to take questions on this via email if I've left people with burning ones, because I know your time is very tight today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I know you have to go in the next minutes, so I don't know if someone have very fast questions or yes, I think we can share your presentation.
And I'm happy to be. I'll send through the PDF of the data that I shared on the link with you, so you can share that as well with everyone.
Dennis, is it possible to make a quick question?
Yes. We have 5 minutes, so.
Okay. No, it will be even shorter. My question is related to the use of this new service by the passengers. Which are the data so far, and also if you already made a comparison before and after the introduction of the on-demand service, about the usage of the public transport by the passengers, because I've seen the quite a different network in the before and after situations. So I was curious about the usage. Thanks.
No problem. It's a little bit difficult on overall usage because we're still recovering. So I think the next couple of months, with a lot more people being back at school, is going to tell us a lot more. During the 4 months it's been running, we have seen about half the users are full fare paying, and about half are concessions one way or another, and that splits reasonably evenly between the youth concession that we offer locally and the older persons and disabled concession. So it's been really, really popular. The youth concession has gone up for us. It's been really popular with young people because they have a £1 flat fare in Milton Keynes, and they can now get anywhere on that. So that's gone up in comparison to where it was with the buses on the subsidised networks pre-COVID. Everything else is pretty much as we're expecting it.
Thank you very much, Adele, also for the really interesting presentation. Thanks.
Wow.
So, if there isn't other question, I think we can go ahead with the most, I don't know, maybe boring, but more related to the project activities. So, Adele, thank you very much. So,
thank you. Bye.
And okay, I screen my screen with the next presentation that is more related to the ETP partners and the activities on which we have to focus on the next month. Give me only 1 second to share my screen. I think now you can see it. Okay, I think you can see it now. So this presentation, so it's not a case, but it's the next step after the state-of-the-art activities. First of all, thanks again, as Andrea presented in his presentation. I think it's very interesting analysis and also I think also very challenging cases. So I think and I hope this state-of-the-art report was also helpful for you in understanding better how to work on improving or create a new demand responsive transport. So we have concluded this part. With some of you, probably you will receive some additional mail from me because it's missing very little details. But in any case, I think we are very close to the finish of this part. And the next step is the preparation of the action plan. So it's the second part of this process. And why an action plan? Because first of all, we send to you the template. So I hope you have also the time to have a fast look of this document. We build this action plan in order to help you also in understanding and in identify some action that able to develop or improve a demand responsive transport. So the main objective, our goals of this action plan is to define clear steps and clear action to reach this objective to improve or to activate demand responsive transport. So solution able to be more flexible and more able also to address the aspects several of you underline in the state-of-the-art report. So an action plan, so we have to identify the action, we have to identify also a time plan, so it's important also to define in some way the timing for reaching this objective. Maybe some of you that follow our first training event remember we also have some aspect from the scientific part. So there is several papers that identify that provide some how to say, some idea on how many time is needed to develop this kind of action. So we need probably years to develop this action, but it's important in this document to define this time plan. And it's also important to identify the key stakeholders. As you know, in the state-of-the-art report, we ask to you not only to analyzing this aspect, but also to identify these stakeholders. We hope this second step in the SMACR project and in the ETP program will be the occasion also to involve these stakeholders in order to share idea and to share plan and to develop a common vision on how to develop this solution. For this reason, our approach in proposing to you this action plan template, it's starting from the experience we have in the SMACR project and is based on these three key aspects. So try to make a synthesis, so to identify some clear step to develop this kind of action. A co-creation, because we know it's complicated solution, they are not easy. So it's important to have the right commitment, both from the technical point of view and from political point of view, to develop this solution, and also multi-stakeholders, because also the subject to be involved with, as also Andrea showed in his presentation, all of you identify many different actors that are needed to be involved in this process to develop an action plan. So it is very important to have clear this, that this multi-stakeholder approach is needed. And yes, we hope this action plan, as you see, it's a very simple template, can help you not in writing a report, because as you can see, we are waiting for something of brief, so something of synthetic. So the goal is to try to help you to identify all the different aspects for reaching your objective, your key objective. So we put here, we need only 2 pages, not more, for each paragraph. And also we ask to you to use tables, to use every kind also of graphic aspect to synthesize the main aspect of this different paragraph. I go a little bit more in deep in the different paragraph, only to show the kind of analysis that we think are helpful to arrive to an effective action plan. So, okay, the introduction, but this is not important. The first step is the aims. So presented in a clear way the objective and the priorities of the identified demand responsive transport development or improvement action. Many of these objectives are already defined in the state-of-the-art report, but in this case we think we have to go a little bit further also in trying to identify also the relevance of the different measures and of the different objectives. So start from the state-of-the-art report and identified which are the key objectives and the key action to be more analyzed in this action plan. As already mentioned, the stakeholders involvement, so this is the third paragraph. Also in this case, we have to start from the stakeholders you already identified in the state-of-the-art report. And here the step further is on identify the actual commitments, so which of the stakeholders are already involved, which stakeholders have to be more involved, so we have to invest a little bit more on involving in the process, the roles of the different stakeholders, and the specific contribution they can give for the possible implementation of this action. This is only an action plan, but we hope this action plan is concrete and also that is able to identify the actions able to be developed in the short and in the medium terms. So key action, as I already mentioned. So the main steps to solve the problem you identified. So in this section, also starting from the issues, from the needs, from the challenges you identified in the state-of-the-art report, in this action plan, we have to identify the key action. So what, which kind of technical solution we can foresee to reach our objective, and the steps, because probably we need of different steps to reach this objective. The time plan also, it's very important, so identify a time frame. Also in this case, as you probably see in the template, we see also in the state-of-the-art report that the 10 different cases are different from the level of maturity. So there is some partner with more experience, some others that are in the beginning of the process. So we think some partners probably are able also to identify some precise, for example, time development. For the other, probably is a little bit more strategic approach. So is to identify if it's a short-term solution or a medium or a long-term solution. So we know it's not easy for all the cases to identify with precision with this time frame, but we ask to each of you to make an effort to be more precise than possible in identify potential and possible time frame for this action development. Another part that is only also related in part to the SWOT analysis and also to some aspect Andrea summarized in its presentation, it's to know also the risk, because some of these risks are already identified in the state-of-the-art report. But here we have to go a little bit more in deep, probably, to understand the direct risk, so the risk that is directly under your control from some point of view or under the control of your stakeholders, and the risk we call the disruptive trends. So, for example, new technologies or new approaches that can change completely the way we are approaching to this problem. But so it's important also to consider this aspect, and in particular when speaking about public transport, we think it's a period and a moment where these trends are particularly strong. So also it's important to considering this aspect, for example, the topic of data or other elements that are very growing very fast in this period related to the public transport management and implementation model. So identify these risks and try also to list the potential solution. So to identify, yes, some strategies, some actions, some action that can be done to minimize this risk. Another relevant topic, and also in this case, we know it's difficult because, as I mentioned, the different cases have different level of implementation and the development, but is an effort to identify the potential funding resources for these cases. So we know probably will be impossible for many of you to identify, for example, to find a precise amount of money needed for develop your services. But we think it's important to start these activities of funding resources, starting for sure in identify the potential funding resources. So if there is the revenues, some European grants and subsidies, national and regional subsidy and funds, if there is some private sector operator. So it's important to identify the potential funding resources, and we think also could be interesting, this is more a proposal, to analyze, if possible, other demand responsive transport cases developed in your countries, because also we know, we also see from the case studies, we also know in the literature is very difficult. And we also, in the last part of the today meeting, we will address this topic about the cost of these services. It's very difficult. They are also very variable from one country to another. But we think it could be important also to see other cases, other local cases, and try to understand which kind of costs or economic business model they in some way develop. So it could be helpful to see other cases in order to know a little bit more about the available funding resources for this kind of solution. Second, another very important aspect, because there isn't an action plan and an action without a monitoring schemes, after defining the solution, after defining the strategies, identify the stakeholders and the funding resources, is important also to identify and to put some quantitative objectives. So put some key performance indicator able to help you in understanding not only for the implementation phase, that implementation is not related to the SMACR project. So in this project, we will arrive to the strategic part, but also in a strategic document, we think it's important to already identify the objective in a quantitative way. And for this reason, you probably see in the template we sent to you, we proposed also some other key performance indicators that are developed in the framework of the SMACR project. So it's some indicators developed by the scientific partners of the project and used for the monitoring of the pilot action in the project. So this is our recommendation. So we don't ask to you to address all the KPI we identified in the document. It's only a proposal and for inspiring you on potential key performance indicator you can use. In particular, as you can see, we classified the different KPIs on categories. So we have the one we call the must-have KPIs. So we think it's very few indicators, but we think are the most important in some way to have a clear visions of your objective on this action plan. So we think it's important and are related to the quality of public transport and to the supply side of these of these measures. And the needs to have KPI that is also related to different topics, so to the quality of the services, the quantity of public transport lines, the visibility in terms also of how to say capacity of promote and to arrive to the final users. So visibility, for example, with website or app or other activities, and care usage and online booking too. So we propose to you different KPIs. We think based also on your cases, you can select and you can try to address the KPIs more suitable for your specific case. The last 2 points, one is related to the key stakeholders, and the important things we, in the framework of this action plan, we think it's important to organize and report at least one event. So one physical or online event in which each of you will speak, will have a roundtable, a meeting with identified key stakeholders in order to identify the elements of this report. So we think it's important to organize at least one of these events, and yes, and to report to us with some photos and the participant list this event. And we think it's fundamental also for the kind of approach we propose for this action plan. And finally, the conclusion, so it's to try to identify also with the assistance of your technical expert that we provided with the SMACR project, to identify some conclusion and yes, arrive to the key results of we think to something able to be developed in the future, in the near futures. And only to remember that this action plan in the project is not foreseen any kind of real implementation, because our project finished to this action plan, but we think we have also occasion and to work more also on implementing, or in some way go more in details of these different cases. The last aspect is related to the time plan. So we finished the state-of-the-art part. So we have from until November, December, we will ask to you a first draft of this report. We will, as we done for the state-of-the-art report, we will do an internal review and ask to you some if there is some clarification or some additional needs in order to have this action plan done. And the last step, and we think also the most important and the most helpful, it's this transnational event in Vienna in February, or probably also in some month later, but in January, in the beginning of the 2022, where this action plan will be presented. And we foresee also, we hope to have some occasion also to exchange impression, to exchange lesson learned, and to exchange all this process with the other partners and with the other stakeholders involved in this process. From my side is all. So now we foreseen some minutes if you have some question on the template we sent to you. It's more related, yes, to the ETP partners. We anticipated the documents, so I hope you have the occasion also to read the documents. So I don't know if there is some doubts, some clarification needs, some suggestion about this template.
Yes, if we can ask a question, if it's possible,
Yeah.
Dennis. Thank you. So let me present us. I am András Lakatos, and next to me Dr. János Tóth sitting. We are from Hungary. We are the experts of Szombathely city regarding this SMACR project. And we have two questions regarding the action plan. One is the stakeholders involved point. We have held a workshop in 2021 June, and am I right that the main aims, the main things, the main results of the workshop can be fitted or can be implemented in this chapter? Because in this workshop a lot of committees were there. For example, the committee of Szombathely, the public transport operators, all of the members from the public transport organizers, and so on?
No, yeah, I think we have to, yes, it's absolutely the kind of information we need. So also this kind of committee, every kind, I think we can report in synthesis, really in synthesis in this report. It's absolutely in line with the activities we have to do. Because yes, I think also to know which kind of subject, for example, committee probably is something new for example. So I think it could be interesting also to understand which kind of I don't know, from above which kind of requests are addressed. So yes, it's absolutely interesting also to considering this kind of event and this kind of topic.
Okay. I see. Well, we see. Thank you. And the second question is that you have mentioned that we shall organize a meeting or an event regarding the action plan. I think it was the ninth point of your presentation. We have held this workshop and we should organize a next next meeting regarding in this ninth point, or we should implement these two workshops for one.
We think it's more in it's on you. We don't identify clearly which kind of event, because I think each of you are free to identify the kind of event or tools more suitable to involve the stakeholders. So from our point of view, I think it's important to involve in some way and to collect the statements of the stakeholders. But I think that we are different partners. There is municipalities, there are public transport companies. So we have also some different cases. So we think each of you is free to identify the best involvement strategies and one event or more than one. I think it's on you to identify the most effective tools to involve the relevant stakeholders.
Okay, thank you. Everything is clear, and we want to thank these useful and good presentations. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if there is some other question, or I think we can do 10 minutes of break before to the second part. Oh, I think there is no question. So if you agree, I think we can do 10 minutes of coffee break to have a coffee. And yes, in 10 minutes we come back and we started with the other cases presentation. See you in 10.
Ora si registrerà la conferenza.
So, welcome back. Now I give the floor to Riccardo for this introduction to the next two concrete cases. We will introduce now only also for have something of more interacting, also Mentimeter. So we be ready to answer to some questions. We will use also for the final parts also to have some general consideration, and also to answer to some of the questions we reached. So I give the floor to Riccardo to its part. I only anticipate, I think you can see in the chat the two link for the Mentimeter questions. So But I give the floor to Riccardo, and it will explain everything.
Thank you, Dennis, and good morning to all of you from my side. I have already shared my screen, so you're supposed to see my presentation now. And what I'm talking about is trying to support the kicking off of the actual development of the action plan. And my goal is to stimulate your reasoning about the overall issue, and so what you should start, or hopefully you have already started making up your mind for reaching this goal. This goal of the development action plan is not just about writing a deliverable, especially in this case, and therefore I would highlight the challenge. I would like to highlight here the challenges that are behind the development of a DRT action plan, and therefore we are also emphasizing the importance of looking for resources in terms also know-how, other experiences, and best practices that can support your process. Also, because we are really at a short span of time ahead, as you can see, even though this point are likely to call, or have to call for a specific process which is taking time. Therefore, this is important to focus as soon as possible on key specific points. And to support and stimulate you about this, we are also, as anticipated by Dennis, making use of Mentimeter. So we are requested to actively interact with us through filling up the poll that you are being presented with just now. I start from this point, which is the first point of the poll, and this is about the expected issues. What are the expected issues at this stage of your analysis? And therefore, what we like you to start thinking about is thinking about the most critical, potentially most challenging or critical themes of the development of the DRT action plan. Therefore, from the most supposed to be challenging to the less problematic according to your expectations. I would like to underline, this is not about rating the importance of the different parts of the activity you're carrying out. Basically, you are supposed to rank here what is, let's say, most feared from you at this moment. But sometimes being the fear is not a bad thing. It's something that allows us to avoid dangers of future not successful implementation in this case. And so I will just group the key points in five points that are you are supposed to assess. The first is a very relevant one. Stakeholder engagement and involvement has already been anticipated also, and then obviously something which is let's say to be done for sure in order to develop a DRT service, defining the most appropriate operational characteristic. And there are many aspects that are called in talking about appropriate operational characteristic: the areas, routes to be served, the level of flexibility, the fleet that you are foreseeing for the implementation. So it's really a complex set of points which is within this one. And then the important part, which is a supportive but really a key success factor of the importance of the technological ICT tools that could be applied. I'm coming back after in the subsequent slide, focusing a little bit about this, but for sure it's well known the importance of these tools nowadays. And then the point of funding resources, of the economic viability, that has been already a little bit anticipated in the first section. Other contingencies, needless to say, the COVID pandemic is one remarkable example about this. I'm just clicking on the link you have been provided, and you can reach from the link in the chat. I suppose you can see, and just selecting starting, I repeat, from the most, let's say, relevant one from the point of potential criticalities from the point of view. You are free to fill in the poll during the presentation and afterward. We are coming back to the results at the very last part of this session. I go on because time is running. And as you know well, DRT is a kind of a hybrid, let's say, between the usual public transport and the taxi maybe. But this is not a hybrid, it's also coming with the many different nuances, which can end up with very different kind of results. Therefore, it is important to define some key points and make your mind really clearly about that. We have just listed some points. The first one is the key drivers of demand and the area you're addressing, the user characteristic, the operating model you are choosing to make, let's say, live with the DRT service. This comes with the decision about the amount of flexibility, which is a really key point for defining your system. And then the tools, the supporting tools that you are going to make use of, and among them the booking system is just one of the part. I have presented with this blue color this 3 points because they are also the point about you are requested to fill in the following poll. So we are also asking you your impression, your feeling at this stage about these specific blue ones among the different points that I am listing here. Involving stakeholder and potential users, as already said. And of course, last but definitely not least, the point of resources, funding versus cost, which is pretty interesting, of course, for the long-term sustainability of the service. We start from this one, the understanding and targeting, because it's the very beginning of each good plan for developing the DRT, and this is what we have been already doing. We need to start the needs and address the different dimensions, the places. We have already developed the analysis of the ETP area, the territorial area you are addressing. You need to understand about the people, what are the actual users supposed to be users of the service and the reasons for their trip. There is a classification in the literature you can find about captive and choice users, just to emphasize the very profound difference that you can find in the target users, and then also in the appropriate service to provide them with. You can range from people, so-called captive, let's say, which are no other alternative but to make use of your service, the service you are providing, and those who can choose, and in some cases could be really choosy, meaning that they are also willing to have a very high level premium service, and they are in condition to use the car, but they want a service which is a little beyond the usual level of performances of public transport. And this is also something which has some profound implication, for instance, also on the willingness to pay. But we do not need to say that in these cases there are some commercial alternatives already ongoing. Maybe the profound need from the social point of view is to provide those who are not in condition to use the car or are in some deprived accessibility areas to have this service. Once understood the needs, and this is what we have already been doing, you have to elaborate on the supply side. Focusing is, according to me, the key, let's say, word on this point, because I just said that DRT is something hybrid. It comes with different nuances, but all those synergies are in general very good things to be pursued. We need to avoid confusion. We need to avoid, and this is also because some literature is emphasizing this point, to avoid addressing the wrong target from the market point of view in developing these services. Different users have different expectations, different threshold of acceptability of prices and performances. So we need to be specific, thou fostering as much as possible, provided it's not hampering the service. We pursue the synergy, provided it is not hampering the appeal of the service for the actual possible users of this service. And another important point of view from the supply side is to be emphasized the need for having an harmonization of timetable, of TKST systems, because we are looking to foster intermodality, so making as smooth as possible the network effect and the change of modes and means of transport. I need to go very quickly because time is running, but I want us to highlight this point because they are the aspect that you are supposed to deal in the second poll. I just click just to show you that there is here a second poll that you are asked to fill in. And then coming back to the presentation, I'm go briefly on this point. The first one is all these questions. The second group of questions is about which approach do you deem is most likely to be envisaged in your DRT action plan. In this case, please pick one option, and concerning the operating model of your envisaged DRT. These are not, it's not about choosing what is good in general, it's just focusing on what is needed on your actual context and on your DRT to be developed. We can have a variety of functions that the DRT is providing. It can provide the interchange feeding, establish a fixed route of public transport corridors and transport hubs for a defined limited geographical area. They are complementing the actual network. This is a pretty clear role, which could be also quite easy to be developed in some cases. I mean, I don't say that in general is less challenging, but it can be probably quite easily understood in terms of the way the service should be designed. This is also about the network effect is about also not only linking to a specific route or a specific transport hub, but it's also about replacing existing public transport and during some hours or areas of low demand. And we have developed accessibility analysis also to emphasize the need for this network improvement. A more, let's say, radical approach is the completely replacing fixed route public transport. We have seen a very interesting example in the first section. And another typical aspect is destination specific, addressing a specific generator of demand. And we have, for instance, the case of an hospital that has been also analyzed in one of our state-of-the-art reports. So this is very specific to a destination and differentiated, for instance, with reference to other kind of services. Now I would like also to emphasize the importance of the level of flexibility you're giving to the DRT you are designing. This is, let's say, a little bit fuzzy classification, but what I wanted just to give a simple three-level classification, ranging from fully flexible to almost fixed or partially fixed, since operating mostly on fixed route and flexing only at specific points. I assume that you are at least having a minimum level of flexibility. That is a minimum, let's say, that we can assume. So this is just not something that you need to stick precisely during the implementation. It's just to, let's say, have a little bit of a picture of your expectation about the level of flexibility. If you would like to be much more specific on the scenarios, on the way you're implementing them, you're designing your DRT, you could refer, for instance, to this representation of different scenarios that has been already presented in the workshop last year. I take the opportunity also to recall the importance of this first event last year, actually it was the second, where already an analysis of literature and of some examples of best practices was provided. We are underline the importance to make reference to this already available material. I have to go very quickly because I'm already very late, so I would skip this part, taking into let's say for granted that you have already been let's say provided with the illustration of the importance of involving stakeholder in the co-design, and but also getting the people aware. You have seen what has been reported by Mrs. Waring, and this takes time. It has to be done during a necessary time framework until citizens and tourists can switch away from their present way to the new one. Although we can see from the example from the UK how rapid could be also the reaction of people. This is calling for different kind of tools. This is what we are asking you are deeming to do about the booking system, which is the last segment of the let's say the process, getting people informed and then on board. Here you can choose obviously free option, but the involvement of people has to be done according to different way and means. We can have at the elderly, for instance, which are not so much keen on ICT. We have the youngsters from the other side, which are much more keen on the ICT. So we need to have a different, let's say, set of way to address the people. I'm a little bit spoiling the correct answer of the poll, of course, but that's it. This is important not only for the design but also for the involvement of the people through events on the ground, let's say, and for the development of information and communication campaign. But at the end of the day, you have to try to foster the usage of innovative ICT tools. There are some very in an emerging market with very interesting tools that are provided that can support you towards the dynamic DRT. And but it's not just about the tools; it's also about the data and the data sharing. And the making that open to the accessibility is not something against or to be comparable with the choice of a specific commercial software. It's something that should give a kind of baseline of data that are necessary to be shared and analyzed by all those involved in the decision process. We have relevant possibilities coming from the availability of open data and the possibility to use a consolidated standard as the GTFS that you may already know. We have just seen you what could be done with open tools, making use of this data, the GTFS, which is storing the data about the public transport service, and making some analysis about the accessibility through isochron map that are showing areas reachable from a certain point within different time thresholds. Yeah, just an example from a case study we have analyzed in the state-of-the-art report of Romagna, and you can see the car alternative here, and you can compare. Of course, the comparison is a bit unfair, but just a way to visualize how the public transport service is covering the area and the differences between peak and off-peak hours. This is a nice way to visualize, but also to analyze the things, because you can, for instance, add the service you're designing and see how things are changing with this tool, which is open and can be quite easily processed. I go through the end, just saying that we will come back to the point of ensuring adequate resources at the end during the question session. And I would like to also you to focus on the factors that could hamper the success of your DRT. I make reference also in this case to the presentation had in the workshop last year that you can refer to. Just a few points that I want to underline here is the importance of making up your mind, because a key factor hampering success are unrealistic expectations about cost and the lack of understanding about targeted demand. Then you could have some, let's say, temptation of doing something which is beyond the reach, and also the problem of cooperation with other and not conflicts with other mode alternatives. And I would then just jump to the conclusion, saying that underline once again that we are dealing with the complexity of a multifaceted challenge and the importance of giving the adequate time frame, not only during the development of the action plan, but also in the follow-up phases, because as you can see, the approach in UK was having something modular that you can adapt, monitor and adapt during the process towards then the objective of long-term sustainability supported by an overall long-term vision. Yes, I would stop here because we are in the delay, and I would give the floor then to the other speakers.
Yeah, thank you, Riccardo, very much. I give the floor to Gabriele Grea from Red Mind. 1 second. First of all, thank you very much to joining us. I don't know. 1 second. Okay, I think now you are the presenter. So thank you very much. We are very happy, and thank you for your availability to present this SharePlace project. That is another Central Europe project with work, we think, also in similar topics to our SMACR project. And as this project ended last years, I think have also some real concrete results. In particular, I suggest also to see the website of the project, because I think there is very interesting reports and data and cases from this project. So I give the floor to Gabriele. Thanks again to join us. And,
well, thank you, Dennis, for inviting me and giving me the chance of sharing with you and the SMACR ETP group the results of our project. So I will quickly guide you through the let's say development of our project, which ended in November 2020, with a specific focus. The project is not dealing was not dealing only with DRT, but a large part of our let's say activities and pilots were then ended up focusing on flexible services. So I hope you can see my screen. Is everything fine?
Yeah, yes, we can see it.
So basically, what is SharePlace? SharePlace was a project basically like relying on two main pillars or two main groups of services, the flexible and the shared mobility services. The idea behind the project was to develop an innovative approach in order to improve connectivity, basically by integrating flexible and shared mobility options inside the traditional transport systems and networks. The project, as I said, was running between May 2017 and November 2020. We had 11 partners in 5 countries: Austria, Italy, Germany, Hungary, and Croatia. So basically, like quite much overlapping somehow with your experience. As I said, the project was let's say started with a objective of finding a solution to the need of better integration between traditional and innovative services. Therefore, let's say the solutions which have been developed during the projects were co-designed with the support of the different ranges of stakeholders, and they ended up basically, as this picture shows, in 5 different approaches. We had approaches to digitalization and integration of data with the creation of multimodal trip planners, an integrated platform for mobility data in Germany, in Ulm, and in Osijek in Croatia. as a basic open source approach to the integration. And we have seen in these two cases the progressive integration of different kind of services within these platforms, which is still an ongoing process, and particularly promising. I will show you later a link of the repository of the open source code, which has been shared by the project and on which several cities after the end of the project are building on in order to better integrate, let's say, the digital part of existing and new services. Then we had a specific case related to shared services, and in particular to the integration between carpooling and existing transport networks in Bergamo. And then we have two pilot cases really focusing on the RT. One is in Zalaegerszeg in Hungary, and the second one is in Crema, and as I was in Italy. And as I will show you briefly, the approach to the experience on DRT is, let's say, quite different in a different context, but we identified, let's say, a common approach, which is the common approach, strategic approach of the project, in order to, let's say, manage the complexity of driving DRT towards a better integration and better, let's say, sustainability options along time and durability. So, what were the challenges? I mean, I selected 4 challenges which might be interesting and fitting to our case today. The first challenge was to foster participation and to achieve a high level of stakeholder engagement. For this reason, we have developed, trained, and used for training and implemented a common methodology on stakeholder engagement and a common concept of living labs, which have been established in the 5 pilot areas in order to accompany the process of co-design and co-creation of new solutions. The second challenge is indeed the implementation and testing phase. Of course, as you also know, this is not an easy process, especially because during the co-design phase, many interesting options, many promising developments are drafted, and then the real testing has to, let's say, fit into organizational processes and also some, for example, contractual constraints, continuity of the service constraints. Therefore, there were some interesting challenges we had to face. The third aspect, which is kind of central to our project, but I think is very, very central in terms of long-term sustainability of DRT as well, is the topic of digitalization and data sharing for integration. And the last one, of course, last but not least, I would say as an economist, economic sustainability of the services, of the solutions, the possibility, the need of extracting good value from the innovation approach, and the paradigms of collaborative approaches and collaborative economy in order to make innovations feasible and sustainable also in specific areas with specific characteristics, for example, low demand areas and so on. So, moving from the challenges to the results, just to summarize a bit what we have done and what you will find as a support on the website of the, among the outputs of the project. As I said, we have developed what we call a technology service hub, which is an open source solution for integration of traditional and flexible and shared services. For the ones who have a bit of knowledge of development, IT development issues, there is a repository with all the code there is a community which is continuously improving it and applying it in different areas. So if you go now, if you enter this community, personally, I don't know really how to do it because they speak a different language, so I don't understand much. But as far as I see the results ongoing, I see that this is a very promising approach, especially for those areas which don't have, let's say, the possibility of building a big or say tendering a big proprietary system for the digitalization of data and transport. The second, let's say, level of achievements is the drafting of sustainable business models, which are accompanying now the pilot projects to further phases and potentially the scaling up in their areas. And the third is the results of the services I briefly described, which have been activated during the project and are now in the phase of being, let's say, maintained, developed further, and inserted in the business as usual of transport companies which supported their implementation. So let's focus now a bit on DRT, what we have done on DRT. We have three levels of experiences. The first experience I'm going to mention is related to Croatia, the city of Osijek, which identified in its co-design process DRT as a potential element, well integrating and matching very well with the demand need and with the characteristics of the existing networks. Unfortunately, at the moment, the Croatian legislative framework doesn't, let's say, doesn't include DRT as an option for public transport operations. Therefore, the experience in Osijek resulted in a very interesting feasibility study for the area, which also has the double meaning of, let's say, trying to foster the debate at national level in order to make these options, let's say, more feasible and potentially integrated into the existing networks. Then there was a second pilot with a specific aim in Hungary, in Zalaegerszeg. The aim was of generating better accessibility in some defined peripheral areas, which did not have public transport services, some hilly areas in the peripheries, in the outskirts of the city. And therefore, in this case, the service was co-designed from scratch with the participation of users and stakeholders and tested in several phases. What was the stress and the specific characteristic of this pilot? The great attention since the very early stages, and this is something we had to push a bit in the feelings of the people, to the integration process, the integration with the existing network. This is because in many cases, what you see when you, let's say, suggest a new solution in a, let's say, greenfield area like this one, the understanding the potential of integration, not only from the demand side, but also from the supply side, in terms of synergies, in terms of better management, in terms of economics as well, is clearly not perceived so much by the final users, which basically wants to go from A to B and wants to find the perfect, more convenient, and of course feasible solution. So what is the giveaway of this pilot? The services were very successful. The platform managing the booking was, let's say, built on purpose and with potential of integration with the existing platform of the transport operator. And the pilots started, let's say, a debate, a discussion, an internal debate, discussion within policymakers, within transport planners, among transport operators on how to better, let's say, integrate operationally these services, but also economically. So what can be the synergies between these existing services and the network to make them, of course, more sustainable? But we will come back to that in the conclusions. The third approach was the approach, let's say, born in terms of co-design in Crema, and then also applied in Pavia during the COVID, during and after, let's say, the COVID high intensity phase. And the idea was to improve an existing service which exists from since 12 years, I think, with the use of a new technological platform, which is making it more demand responsive, potentially more flexible and integrated, but at the same time that could optimize the processes and optimize say the use of resources in order to make it more sustainable. Also in this case, the tests were, let's say, very successful. Let's say the take-up of the service worked very well. Of course, there is always a trade-off between, and you know it better than me, between the efficiency of the transport service as such, and the platform can optimize a lot of it, putting specific constraints to the, let's say, user model. And on the other side, the user satisfaction, as Adele was mentioning, in many cases, when the quality of service is perceived lower, is because the service has some constraints and becomes less flexible. We did an analysis of different operational and business models, and it's clear that there is a trade-off between the possibility of sharing the services and finding good economics, and the level of flexibility, which is maximum in private mobility, which is very high in a taxi-like service, but in different operational models has to be somehow reviewed. So let's go back to the, let's say, key questions also that I think emerged also from the discussion today. So first of all, how did we run the, let's say, stakeholder engagement and co-design process? I won't spend too much, but I will suggest that maybe we circulate it also, but it's available on the website. We refer to our engagement and co-design guidelines, which summarize the experience of the service, so of the project. So the questions clearly that and the steps that guide to, and the methodologies that guide to the stakeholder engagement are fundamental. So the question is to which extent you can let's say map and classify relevant stakeholders. So this is the first element. The second one is how you keep the analysis on tracks. So the analysis, for example, of needs and expectations on track of what is feasible, of the final objective of your co-design process. So answering a specific question, a specific need on the territory, on which stakeholders have to agree, of course. And then how you give a sort of continuity, for example, following the loop of the sustainable urban mobility planning process to this continuous improvement and continuous co-design process, because it takes time. It takes several iterations to, let's say, scale up the service, diversify it when it's needed, and further and further integrate it, because also the political cycle is quite long, integrated in the planning tools. So these are basically questions that we asked our partners during the final conference, and it's also questions that I think you will have to ask yourself preliminary somehow in order to run the stakeholder engagement process and define as it was, let's say, well explained before, define what kind of operational model, so what kind of answers you want to give and how to your final users after analyzing proper their needs and expectations, and as well and the context as well. So let's jump to the last topic, which is the sustainability of business models. So in general, we ran an analysis, a cross-cutting analysis of different services business models, which have been drafted and somehow to a certain extent tested in the different pilot areas. So these conclusions refer to the different pilots, so to the general objective of identifying tools to integrate traditional and flexible mobility. But give us some very interesting hints, I think, which can be applied or are being applied in some cases to DRT. So first of all, also in terms of costs of revenues, the business model has to take to look very much into the creation of conditions for digitalization and for integration. When we talk about digitalization, we're not talking about something which is expected to generate digital divide. So not only the front end towards the final users. Of course, it's nice to have a nice app where you can book, where you can do real-time access to DRT and so on, but this is not the point. The real point is to digitalize the backup of the services and to better integrate it into a complex ecosystem of services. Again, let me refer to the Milton Keynes case. The first step for them was to connect to the commercial buses and connect the booking system to the commercial buses, as I understood, because sometimes the best option is really to use scheduled services. And this high level of integration helps also to optimize the offer of the service. So it should not be let's say, a taboo or something difficult to foster this kind of integration. Of course, you have to, let's say, take into account what are the benefits that can be generated by these synergies. The second aspect is related to regulatory and funding frameworks, which in some cases have to be innovated in order to allow this real integration. Let's think about the data aspect again, but also the clearing systems for tariffs and so on, but also the regulatory framework as such of public contracts or public service contracts, for example. The third aspect is when is suitable, the possibility of developing peer-to-peer solutions on a community basis. This is really for low demand areas. Of course, all these points are connected with each other. So you need a proper regulatory framework in order to do that, and you need a proper, let's say, dialoguing system, a proper ecosystem in order to, let's say, take the best from peer-to-peer solution whenever it's needed. And the last one is the possibility of providing incentives, not necessarily only monetary, but to the citizens which are committing to more sustainable mobility options in order to generate demand. But these are, of course, as I said, general conclusions on business models. Let me go in the specific of the two cases for which we developed business models for the scaling up. This is the case of Crema, where I told you, let's say, they are going under a review of the existing traditional model, trying to make it more, let's say, not necessarily more flexible, because it is very flexible as it is, but let's say more comprehensive. So there is a discussion on how to develop new operational systems which are better blending different models of DRT from the point-to-point to the shuttle service and integrating it with the existing lines, which, for example, for the area of Crema, which for those who don't know it, is a, let's say, a small city around 40,000 inhabitants, if I'm not wrong, in a pretty, let's say, rural dispersed area. And the service is only flexible and to be integrated with the extra urban services which are going through the city, basically. So what is the point here in terms of, let's say, economics? The point is to identify and diversify different services for different target groups, to scale them up through the same platform, and identify, for example, different pricing strategies for different kinds of services in order to be effective in terms of optimizing the existing resources. Sorry, I hope I'm not taking too much of your time. I'll try to be very quick in the conclusions. This is the case of Zelegerseg, where added to the traditional revenue stream, one option is the possibility of involving the public operators, especially those who are benefiting from the intermodality option provided by the DRT, in cross-subsidizing part of the service, or let's say identifying that this is an added value. Then there are two general aspects which are most important to conclude the discussion on business models. First of all, we have the aspect of identifying those lines, those existing lines, which can be effectively replaced in some time frame in the total, so just integrated, completely replaced also by DRT, and let's say make a scale up the economics also on these lines to make the DRT system more sustainable as a whole. And the second aspect is to let's say go into the depth of existing service contracts to try to understand how to improve let's say the regulatory integration between the different kind of services, and to identify incentive leverages to data sharing, to service integration inside the tendering procedures and inside the service contracts. So I'm finished. Sorry for going a bit long. I leave you with some hopefully useful links. So our project publications, the open source code, the examples of DRT in Crema and Pavia that you can look up. And let me conclude with an invitation. I mean, we are very keen and we would be very happy to share further our experience as SharePlace Consortium, as SharePlace project. What I got to know is that there are several similarities. There are several tools which have been developed in SharePlace that can be useful for you to develop your action plans and to go beyond them in the future. So please don't hesitate to contact me. I will maybe even suggest Dennis if we can already like share, for example, the co-design guidelines among the group of participants, because maybe you can find interesting hints and useful hints for your process, for your co-design process. And well, I'm at disposal for let's say further support and further advice if you think it's needed on this topic, and let's say do what we can do as a consortium also to accompany your experience to make it as effective and useful as possible. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Gabriele. Yeah, I think also, yes, probably some of you can be I don't know. I have also to use this tool and this information for our action plan, and for sure we will send also a dedicated email with the co-creation guidelines and also these links to all the ETP partners, because I think it could be inspiring for our next month activities. So now I go to the third case. I give the floor to Michele Scozzai. I don't know if you have a presentation to share, or in case I give you the role of presenters. And yes, it will present the case from Trieste Trasporti that we think it's another very interesting case with the other we presented today. I don't know if Michele Scozzai, you can hear us.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
No?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Michele Scozzai. I'm the Customer Relations Manager of TPL FUG and the Head of Institutional Relations of Trieste Trasporti. TPL FUG is the consortium that manages the local public transport service in Friuli Venezia Giulia. Trieste Trasporti is one of the 4 companies that are part of the consortium. First of all, sorry for my very bad English. Unfortunately, I only have a few minutes of time and I've not been able to prepare a presentation, and therefore I will speak off the cuff. The first on-demand service in Trieste, but also the first experience in Friuli Venezia Giulia, lasted about 8 months, from July 2019 to March 2020. It was an important experience that helped us to understand how the service works, to understand the dynamics and characteristics of demand. The service was activated as part of the project co-financed by European program Interreg Central Europe, you know. The goal was to make mobility more efficient and functional. In our case, the pilot was made on the outskirts of Trieste, where bus lines are less frequent than in the city. Keep in mind that Trieste is one of the most widespread bus networks in Italy. Each inhabitant make an average of more than 300 trips a year on our buses. In the partnership of the project, there were the Venice International University, which is an international training and research consortium in Venice, and the Ca' Foscari and UAV universities of Venice. The pilot action want to test a transport service with flexible schedules and routes in the outskirts of Trieste, as I said, in line with the regional plan of local public transport of the Friuli Venezia Giulia region. But the pilot value was not only local. In 2020, in fact, the TPL FUG consortium became the new concessionaire for the local public transport service in Friuli Venezia Giulia. TPL FUG is today one of the 5 major Italian operators of the local public transport service. And in the coming months, TPL FUG will have to activate on-demand service similar to that of Trieste in the mountain areas of Friuli Venezia Giulia. And this is why our experience was not just an academic exercise, but a real test. Our on-demand service was called Smart Bus. The service concerned the strip of territory that extends between Basovica, near the border with Slovenia, and Borgo San Mauro on the border with the province of Gorizia. It's about 150 square kilometers where about 30,000 people live. The average population density here is 190 inhabitants per square kilometer, compared to over 2,000 in the urban area. The on-demand service, was authorized, of course, by the Friuli-Venezia Giulia region, which is the owner of the local public transport service here in Friuli-Venezia Giulia. Smart Bus worked only on the tracks of the normal scheduled service, but unlike the normal public transport service, Smart Bus moved by reservation only. The service was active every day of the week, including holidays, from 8:30 in the morning to 9 in the evening. There was 2 buses in service, both 10 meters long, customized with logos and colors of the project, of course. One operating in the western part of the province, and one in the east part of the province. The 2 buses connect the more peripheral towns of the province with the Officina and Prosecco hubs, which are interchange nodes from which it is easier to take a bus to get to the center of Trieste. To assess the service, customers first had to register. This could be done via web or by communicating their data to a dedicated call center. And after registering, the customer could book a ride by choosing the departure stop, the arrival stop, and the time slot of the trip. The customer could ask to leave after a certain time, or alternatively to arrive at their destination within a chosen time. In the first case, the software searched for a trip available within 30 minutes after the indicated time. In the second case, the system looked for a race to reach its destination in the 30 minutes that precede the indicated times. Once the booking was confirmed, the software automatically checked if there was a ride available and sent the user the departure time via text messages or email. If the ride was not available, the customer was asked to contact the call center to find a different travel solution. The reservation was possible until 2 hours prior to the execution of the race. The bus stop of the on-demand service were a total of 300 out of a total of about 1,500 stops in the province of Trieste. In the first phase, the service was free for everyone, and then a cost of 2 euros per ride was introduced. Customers could pay by credit card or with a prepaid coupons that could be bought through our resellers network. For customers who had a bus pass and for people with disabilities, the service was always free. But the software was developed by Plus Service, which is an Italian company that develops software for local public transport companies. The service started in June 2019 and remained active until March 2020. Then with the COVID emergency, all services were reduced and the on-demand service has been stopped. The total cost of the initiative in the 8 months of operation was 230,000 euros. And the amount includes the cost of the startup, the technological platform, the call center, the website, advertising, and communication. So 250,000 euros. Okay, in line with all main European experience, such as this one, traffic revenues only cover the very small part of the costs. Okay, but okay, were the pilot result? The project had both strategic and qualitative goals. First of all, we want to confirm our orientation toward innovation that Trieste Trasporti has always had. Okay, even in a sector such as that of local public transport, traditionally unwilling to innovate in Italy. Secondly, an on-demand service has been tested for the first time in Friuli-Venezia Giulia, and this service will have to be extended in the coming month, as I said, to other areas of the region. Therefore, the pilot initiative was used to evaluate the service from a technical point of view, technological, logistic, and planning, of course. At the beginning, the project provided that Smartbus could also carry out a cross-border service with Slovenia, but the national legislation today, as you know, does not allow the local public transport service to cross national borders. And then there is the customer feedback. The customer feedback, also the number have been small. The project has helped to spread a new idea of public transport in the area. A new idea that is very different from traditional one. At first, the customers were very lazy. Only later they began to use the service more and more. The number, a total of 1,800 people traveled on the Smartbus. So on average, just over 2 passengers per trips. The total requests were just over 2,000 and the satisfaction rate was 78%. Therefore, in the 22%, there were no available rides. Okay, it is sure that 10 meters buses were oversighted, that we know. 75% of the customers had a bus pass, and the total kilometers traveled were just under the 50,000. Okay, the first lesson we learned is that the on-demand service is a possible response to the low profitability of some bus lines. Many European experience have shown that on-demand service increase the number of passengers per kilometer and reduce unproductive routes. But it takes time, it takes patience and a lot of time. Yeah, and above all, a cultural change is needed because people have to get used to calling the bus and no longer just waiting for it at the bus stop. It is a cultural change that for people over 60 takes a long time. and then there is the problem of financial sustainability. On-demand service are not self-sufficient anywhere in the world, you know. On-demand service they cost a lot of money, but they go in the right direction. I think that the current model of the local public transport service in Italy is a 20th century model, and it will change in the coming years, in my opinion. On-demand service will be a small piece of this transformation. Okay, once the critical phase of COVID is passed, Trieste Trasporti will again activate on-demand service from next November, probably. We will do it in two directions. The first one concerns the activation of a night on-demand service that can connect the suburb with the city center, mainly for the university students who frequent a restaurant or bar at night. And the second direction is a link between the suburbs and the coastal strip to integrate the normal bus service, especially in the times when demand is weak. Next time, however, we will use a different software. We will use the Via Van software, which is a better software than Plus Service. It is more robust and more user-friendly. Okay, but I think that's all for me. I'm done. Okay, sorry again for my English. I thank you and I apologize, but I have to leave because I have another meeting. And if you have any question, you can send me an email to this email. I try to share if I.
Thank you. In the meantime, very much. I think it's very clear. No problem. We understand everything. I think.
Okay.
Provide to us a lot of very.
Okay. This is my email. Okay. You see me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Very interesting information.
Everyone.
So we are a little bit late, but we go to the last part. As you know, we ask to you if you have some question for us. So also. If you agree, Riccardo, I think we can start from the question before to the Mentimeter part. I think we can use the Mentimeter for the end of our training. So I go very fast, only to anticipate. So we received two questions. I start from maybe the easiest one. And the easiest is related to the availability of cases of demand responsive transport in mountains area, so in mountains area. I have
maybe I can add to that. We have heard now this introduction, kind of lessons learned about the peripheral areas, and but he said that there were around 119 inhabitants per square kilometers. While the presentation, I did some calculations, and we have around 9.5 inhabitants per square kilometer in our area. So the question is really about this low density, like if there is any projects already with not people in the hundreds but lower than that, really scattered in the area. So we don't have the possibility to do some mobility hubs or something like that, because the people are living too far apart.
Yeah, thank you for this clarification. Only I introduce one aspect that is one of the next activities we have to do in this project, only to know because you ask also in relation to case studies. So one of the activities on which we have to work on the next month is related to the construction of a toolbox of different cases. And for sure, also in the SMACR project, we have some pilot and some actions that operating in a very low density areas with, for example, the one here in Emilia-Romagna, I think part of the services that SRM is testing, it's in a very low density area with also very little villages. And yes, so it's, I think, quite similar to your context. So for sure, only to make these general answers, in the next month, we will provide also this case studies toolbox. So we think and we hope we are able also to share not only the cases from other European projects, not only the cases which we are working on our project, because we have for sure some experience. So when the deliverable and when these testing phases will end, we probably will have more data also from these cases on how to address demand responsive transport in low density area, because also the solutions are very difficult. Are very different. Depends, for example, there is some rural area, but with train stations, so we can manage in some way the service, but for a last mile service, if to simplify the approach, or we have other cases where this kind of infrastructure are not available, so the kind of services is completely different. So the challenges and the business models are different. But I'm confident, and I hope also in these toolbox activities we have to do in the framework of the project, to be able also to provide to you some real cases and some different approaches to demand responsive transport in low density areas. So,
if I may add, another issue we have noticed is the age, because we have like around a quarter of the inhabitants are over the age of 60, 65. So if it's possible to add to this toolbox a little about the demographics about the other areas.
Yeah. Also, in this case, I think we have also here it's quite, for example, only to mention our ETP is not now here joining our meeting, but we know there is this age problem in assessing new technologies. But for example, here in Italy, in Emilia-Romagna region, in this little village that is one of our ETP, we discover in reality the old people, but also very old people, organize themselves in order to have an access of this kind of services. For example, there is, I don't know how to say in English, but it's aggregation center where these old people go for leisures. And for example, here there is some informal support to provide and to support also, for example, the old people in booking the services. So I think this is only one case I know, but I think also in this case, the demographic aspect, it's we know, and we also see in the state-of-the-art reports, it's one of the biggest challenges. So we are very clear this aspect, and also in the pilots we have in the SMACR project, these problems are addressed in several ways. For example, also okay, not only an app, but for example also foreseen a telephone service together. And probably in the Mentimeter results you will see something about this, that we have some, I think it's quite clear that probably many of the cases use phone that is, I don't know, more accessible tools for older people, but not is not necessary. In any case, also old people, sometimes we discover are absolutely able to use, probably better than some young people, this kind of tools. And we are quite surprised, but we see this, for example, here.
Thank you.
So if there is no other question in relation to this mountain and low density area, we think we can pass to the second question that is a little bit more complicated to the answer, that is related to the cost of the services, and to simplify the questions, if this service is more expensive for compared to the traditional transport system, and which kind of tools we can use to monitor the cost-benefit ratio among in relation to these measures. I think it's a quite difficult answer, so maybe I give the floor also to Riccardo, that he have some specific skill also in using cost-benefit tools and this kind of tools to try to provide some insight on this aspect.
Okay, just briefly, because this question could open a lot of sub-points, but basically DRT are known to be expensive also because they are addressing really challenging situations. Usually when it comes, for instance, for the mountains, DRT is what is seen as a solution when other schemes are not capable of keeping up with the costs. So if you have a statistic about the subsidies, etc., it's quite, let's say, reasonable that you are seeing higher level of subsidies needed for keeping up with these services, because they are addressing basically a very challenging context on average. But on the other hand, I would say that we cannot generalize, and in some cases, well targeted and devised, they can provide the cost-effective solution. And I would say that the best example is also that we've been seeing in the first session with the example for Milton Keynes. This is just to give, let's say, an example that is more relevant to a theoretical, say, evaluation. But about the theoretical evaluation, cost-benefit is really, let's say, interesting as an exercise. There are also some paper about the possibility of developing also this kind of analysis for the DRT. Of course, we need to underline the level of uncertainties that are there. Also, from the point of view of modeling, Gabriele before was correctly hinting at the complexity of the backside when talking about the ICT tools, etc. And the complexity of the backside is also to be, let's say, taken into account with reference to the modeling. We have tried to grasp the information about the demand, and we have just a rough picture of the demand that is there. Because of the lack of information, we are looking at some very difficult kind of information to be grasped from the actual data sources. We are not limiting to the commuters' mobility, which is that one that usually is likely to be available. Also in our state-of-the-art report, there can be seen a kind of, let's say, contradiction between the fact that we are looking at the possibility of making people traveling beyond the off-peak hours, also for leisure activities, or not to usual commuter activity. But at the end of the day, mainly the data that we have are related to the commuting. Of course, there are new possibility given by and this is still another subtopic of the ICT label. There are the data from the mobile phones that could help us, but it seems to me that at this point the distance between the data that should be needed for and the uncertainties implied in the methodologies for modeling the demand at such a dynamic and really say refine the kind of phenomenon to be modeled is really high gap. Therefore, we can come up with some interesting assessment. Probably we should make up our mind, especially with regards to the level of expenditure for financial viability, but giving not too much credit from a figure that we can come up with because of this still to be underlined levels of uncertainty at from different point of view. And moreover, when I just take the opportunity, I'm like a bit elaborating on the idea of the cost-benefit analysis is I'm simplifying, to come up with a number for making a decision. And you know that you have to do this because maybe you are deciding about a long-term investment, infrastructural investment. Here, maybe it's much more about different factors to be assessed in core design with the different kind of stakeholder and through a stepwise process. This is also about the monitoring and also the fine-tuning that you have to implement, which was also seen in the example from Milton Keynes. They are eager to share data, but first of all, to have the data helping them to fine-tune the services very dynamically. There is a kind of contradiction. You have to keep track of the process, and the process could be lengthy because people are not immediately reacting. But this is what we have to do. Therefore, it takes time to reach I can say, the stationary situation when you can be foreseen and having a good outcome and really realistic comparison between your forecast and what's going on the ground. I hope I'm not missed something relevant. For sure, we have had some positive answers in terms of possibility to support, but of course, as said by Michele, mostly these are services that are to be subsidized. And this is the point, unless you have very niche services commercially, let's say, valuable, but maybe they're not the target of this kind of initiative as this project. Just these are my points. Of course, it would take a lot of other points, further elements, but basically this is what I feel to support to be said.
If I can add something very, very quickly. On one side, the DRT services have a great potential in terms of monitoring of costs, as Riccardo said, because you know exactly how much you can reconstruct the cost per kilometer and per passenger, because you know always exactly how many passengers you're carrying and where and how. So it's a long process. It's a fine-tuning process, as we have seen in Milton Keynes, but this is a potential. This is high potential of DRT in terms of knowledge, of having information and using it for fine-tuning the service. On the other side, when we talk about cost benefits analysis, besides the environmental part, but let's stick to the financial one anyway, it's a tool which is used, as Riccardo said, to decide between alternatives. And so we always should consider that when we plan a DRT, we always should consider what the other alternatives would cost, how cost effective and what benefits can generate in terms of accessibility, for example, not only environmental, even the change of existing lines, low demand lines, with new technologies in a more let's say flexible key.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you very much. The question was mine, and I thought that it was very relevant also because it is a very strong belief, especially when you have to involve stakeholders in this kind of project and to talk about DRT services. There is a very strong belief that the cost is too much, and it is a very particular aspect to be considered when you have some local bodies and other stakeholders. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to you. Of course, just what I like to add, there are also the point of the bad practices, because in many cases it has happened that costs were not capable to be kept under a certain level. So it's a relevant issue for sure, and maybe we are seeing something about that in the presentation of Metimeter outcomes. Dennis.
Yes, I share my screen 1 second to see the results. So this is the first questions.
Dennis, if you want, I sent out also a PowerPoint presentation with this, but exactly the same. But anyway, it's the same.
No, if you want to share the screen, okay.
No, it was just put it on the PowerPoint template. I just sent it to you, so if you want to, exactly the same.
Okay, so well, one second. I download the presentation now. Only 1 second. Sorry, but my laptop is not so performing, but it's still alive. Okay. Okay, I'm here. Okay, I think now you can see it. Can you see it? Okay. So these are the first results, only to, so I have some windows. So to the first DRT action plan, rank the most critical aspect. So the first one is related to addressing the team of funding resources. So we are perfectly, we have the confirmation of this one. It's a very important aspect for all of you, and I think for everyone is working on these topics. Second aspect is related to the stakeholders' engagement and involvement. So also in this case, we hope the action plan template and the methodology can help you and us in involving in the proper way the different stakeholders. Also, we hope the SMACR project can be an occasion and an opportunity to address at least this relevant aspect. Third one is related to the identification of the most appropriate operational characteristic for a DRT services. So this aspect, and the last two, it's related to the COVID-19 pandemic and the understanding technologies. Also in this case, I think it's quite a confirmation that often the technology is not the main problem, as in the last years several solutions, both commercial and open sources, and are available. So from the technological point of view, probably, and the ECT tools, it's not a problem for all of you. Going to the second. Okay, sorry. So DRT operating model. So mainly it's related to the network approach. So enhancing part of existing transport. So okay, the 45% is this network approach, and the substitute approach is only 5%. So I think is interesting only probably one of you in relation to your ATP cases. And with the 25%, both destination specific and interchange feeding. So it's related, and we know also from the state-of-the-art report we have read that it's probably related to the different goals you have. It's more related, for example, of serving an hospital, so destination specific, or to interchange, mainly often also for touristic reasons, or to merge different, to have a more effective intermodal chain. The amount of flexibility, so the 50% choose the want to have interest on semi-flexible services. So I think it's very interesting. So 50% semi-flexible, 33% both this approach, and fully flexible, okay, 17% it's working on fully flexible services DRT system. Booking system, this is something we probably expect is related to the booking system. And okay, the 80% of you will use both this system probably to address the topics of which we speak some minutes ago, in relation to reach also with the phone center, with a phone center, probably older people or in general people with some problem also in addressing the app and the related technologies. Okay, and booking system, I think it's all from this data. I think it's are very interesting and are the topics on which we will work on the next month in relation to the action plan. I don't know if there is some additional comments on these results, on the topics we addressed today, or we are 30 minutes late. I'm really sorry. I hope it is an interesting meeting and you will forgive us for this 30 minutes delays. So if there aren't questions, thanks again. Thanks to join our training event. We will send in the next days the materials and also the recording of this event. We hope our technological devices not make some surprise to us, because we had this morning some problems, but it seems everything is working properly. So we will share this presentation, this registration, and also send to you the link, for example, to the SharePlace deliverable for our action plan. So thanks very much to the speakers, mainly. Gabriele is still here to follow us until now. Thank Riccardo and Andrea also to help us from ITL to also manage, because as you can see, this 10 action state-of-the-art report have a lot of information, a lot of relevant data. So it's also time-consuming activities, but we hope it is helpful for you, and also for sure for the project also to have more data and to work on our specific cases. And thanks to the ETP partners for the survivor one that are still here. Thanks for the state of the art, and we will receive some additional mail from me in the next month in relation to the action plan. And we really hope to see next year in presence also to discuss on this aspect and on the action plan we developed. And we hope also to have this final opportunity to meet in person in Vienna. So thank you very much again, and have a nice afternoon.